Stable beauty, stable smells. Nice title, right, for Christmas. So the gospel today, we had kind of the theological meaning of Christmas, this background that's there, the light, life, the Son of God has come. Last night, we had the picture of the stable, the manger scene, the famous scene when, if you've seen Charlie Brown Christmas, that Linus comes out and says, "Behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to them." So we have this Christmas scene, stable beauty on the one hand. So I'm sure you've all received Christmas cards that have the starry night, the sheep and the shepherds, the cozy fire, the smiling cow, the donkey, pristine Mary, serene Joseph, sleeping baby. Now, there is a truth there, right? Now, I don't think the scene looked exactly like that, but the truth that seems to be portrayed through that art is grace has come. The light has come. Something new, something beautiful. But at the same time, I think the scene is a little bit removed from us. We look at that and we just kind of think, oh, that's sweet. But I don't think our lives are these porcelain figures of, all day standing around like that. At the same time, we have stable smells. We go to that same scene, and that time, when it actually happened, when Jesus was born, we have unkempt shepherds, unshorn sheep with matted fleece, Mary and Joseph sweaty and tired after a week long, at least a week, of travel from Galilee down to Bethlehem. And they had nowhere to clean up. They're in an animal stall. And Jesus is laid in a feeding trough. And pardon the expression, but that's where animals ate and slobbered. Have you ever seen a horse eat? I mean, they're not the neatest things, right? Manure is in the back corner. Joseph didn't have time to clean everything up and get everything out. Then there's the smell of the donkey and then the cold draft coming through the opening in the cave. There wasn't this nice, neat door there. There wasn't a heating system. I'm sure he started a fire, but still, there's this scene that is a little bit smelly. And that, precisely there, is where Jesus is born. That's the great truth. The first thing we said, something beautiful, new, light, that's taking place right here. But Jesus is born in a situation that seems so unlikely. We're so used to seeing it every year. Oh, what a nice scene. But, I think any mother who's given birth would not choose to give birth in a stable with animals on hay, with stinky manure and sheep. I don't know. We can take a poll later, but this is the context in which God came, the context of holiness. We could take the context of our day in the kind of the bigger picture of the world, not all the details, but just war, strife, poverty, greed, unrest, bickering, seeking, questions, atheists, agnostics, believers, hope-filled people. The world is full of strife, beauty, confusion, and this is the context today where God comes. And if we bring it closer to home, we have our own lives of our joys, including myself. I have joys and I have sorrows. I have successes and mistakes, strength and wounds. And we must say it, all of us have sinned. We've lied. Maybe we've cheated. Maybe we've done worse. And maybe even worse of all, we've forgotten God, who sometimes seem to have forgotten us. And guess what? God comes today in that context. That's the context. This is reality. Today, wherever you're at, all your past, all your hopes, all your shattered dreams, whatever, that's the context. God comes to be among us. This is the context of holiness. Now that title, that phrase came from a title of a book actually on Saint Therese of Lisieux called that, The Context of Holiness. And the premise of this book is to try to show, sometimes we have this image that saints were born saints, baby saint, little toddler saint, child saint, adult saint. Like this, their whole life was walking around like kind of our Christmas card, just this perfect little scene. Well, Therese Martin was a little baby, had her tantrums, and I'll paint some of the picture. She was a human being. The reason I want to tell a story about her is because it applies to Christmas. The greatest grace of her life, she says, was her Christmas grace when she was 13 years old. Now, some of you know that story, maybe, but I want to give the context first and then build up to what she calls the greatest grace. And when I say it, you'll think, what? You might miss it, actually. So here's the context first. I think it brings her closer to home. And in fact, to see how much suffering was surrounding her. She was born to Louis and Zélie. Louis was a watchmaker. She was a lace maker. They were both successful in their small businesses. So this is the end of the 19th century. And on January 2nd, 1873, when Therese was born, so she's a New Year baby, so you can see right in this time period, right after Christmas, Zélie and Louis had 4 living children, 4 daughters. They had lost 4 children before that. 3 boys when they were babies. And then the most recent one that passed away just 2 years prior to Therese's birth was Hélène. She was 5 years old when she died. She got sick, and it was rather a sudden thing. So anyone here who has lost a child, you know that grief. And I think all of us can imagine how painful that is to lose a child. So when Zélie found out she was pregnant with Therese, I'm sure she was nervous. And keep in mind, Zélie and Louis, they're both blessed, right? Sometimes maybe we have this idea, well, if I was really holy, then I would never be nervous. Well, she's human. She's nervous. And then when Therese is born, on top of that, she was somewhat frail. There was a wet nurse that was kind of helping the family. The other daughters had been nursed by her, but she lived in the countryside. So Zélie and Louis decided to send Therese with her. And in the same period, Zélie, she had already been complaining of a pain in her chest, and then she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So Therese has this shaky foundation at the beginning. She wasn't even around her mother. And you can imagine all the psychologists now say the importance of the first moments that the infant has with the mother. So the first few months, she didn't even know her mother. In fact, when she saw her mother the first time, she was scared of her. She didn't know her. But little by little, they formed a bond when she moved back to the house. And Therese explained she had very fond memories of her mother, her childhood. And then came the day when she was 4.5 years old that her own mother died. Now that shook her. She says that her temperament changed. She noticed she has in her memory, she was always joyful, bubbly, this bright little child. And then after that, she just kind of went back like a turtle into her shell. But she would have tantrums, she'd be moody, she'd be ultra-sensitive. And keep in mind, she's the youngest, so she's the 5th girl, and the oldest is about 15 at this time. And so when her mother died, she clings to Pauline, the second oldest sister. And about 4 years after this, though, Pauline joins the Carmelites. So she loses her second mother figure. Now, you can imagine just the instability in her own life of when we don't have that stable foundation around us, we're shaky. And so that led a little bit more into her, just this shaky temperament, her ultra-sensitivity, just crying at certain periods over nothing, and then she'd cry about crying. So she's this very moody child. Why am I explaining all this? Because she's a real girl that had child's difficulties, but real difficulties. She struggled with scrupulosity. She was over-worried about, did I do the right thing? Is it the right thing? And is this a sin? And just torment. And to a point where she had what they probably call St. Vitus's dance, there's probably another technical name, but some type of nervous disease that should cause tremors, contortions, hallucinations. She was about 9 when this happened, and they thought, is she possessed? what's happening. She almost died, and she was finally cured by the smile of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So this kind of continues, this pattern. 1886, Christmas. So she's 13, almost 14 years old. And she comes home from Christmas Eve Mass, midnight Mass with her family. So it was Celine. Two of her sisters they were nuns already. So two of her sisters and her went to midnight Mass, come back. Louis, their dad, sits down and is like, hopefully this is the last year we have to do this, which meant he was referring to a tradition they had in France of putting little presents kind of in stockings. I think there were shoes in their case. And Therese, she's 13, still really excited about this, as if she were a 5-year-old. And so he was just kind of tired, a little bit annoyed that night. And then Therese runs upstairs. And Celine, her next oldest sister, follows her. Is like, oh no. She's going to ruin Christmas for us. She's going to start crying, and it's going to happen again. I'm going to go up and comfort her. And so she walks in the room, Celine, and sees Therese almost about to cry. And then she runs downstairs, and then she starts throwing her toys around, and everyone's shocked. That right there, what I just explained, that going downstairs, she says, that was the greatest grace of my life. And you're like, that's the greatest grace of your life? Like, come on, what? There's some other spectacular things that happened to her. Why does she say that, and why am I bringing this up? Why am I explaining it so long? First, because it brings her, again, very close to us. She has a real life with real difficulties. Maybe we know someone with temper tantrums. Maybe you have them. I don't know. The greatest grace came when she basically had a prayer where she opened the door to Christ saying, I will not let my hypersensitivity get the better of me. I will not let it control me. And she ran downstairs. And from that moment on, she sees that God flooded her soul with the gift she called courage of heart. And for her, it was kind of the tool she needed to live the rest of her life then. And she talked about, I ran the race of a giant, like these leaps and bounds. She had to grow. She had to keep changing. She was continually challenged. She still had to struggle sometimes when it was like, oh, I really want to cry right now, but no, I won't. No, not that crying's bad, right? But, this hypersensitivity. This should encourage us, at least encourages me, because grace is not something like, oh, if only whatever. If I prayed the right way, or if I made the right wish, or if I prayed for the right thing, or if some miraculous thing from the sky fell upon me. Grace is here today. The same Jesus that helped Therese make that simple prayer and boldly go downstairs is the same Jesus born today. He wants to transform your smelly stable into a home. Now, I include myself in that smelly stable, right? We all have that part. It's our context, what I said at the beginning. So if this means that if there's sin, if there's something you're struggling with, that's sin attached to it, well, he comes to you. He gives you light. He will call you to repentance, to turn towards him, to turn towards the light. Do it. Oh, I can't. I'm attacked. No, just do it. He'll help you. He's the one calling. If you're struggling with just imperfection, I wish I didn't have this difficulty. He comes with this message, Emmanuel, I am with you. I am with you. And so many other things, but it's a very simple message, and that's kind of the summary. I am your God, and I am with you. And if you're scared of me, I'm a little baby. Just pick me up. So remember, when you receive God's grace, not if, when, it's also going to be a gradual process, how it takes fruit in your life, how it unfolds. It's mostly a change of attitude. Sometimes we have great healings. Hopefully that happens. But he always goes after the heart. He always wants to transform that. So the final question, I think, really is, and this is challenging, and I say it to myself, do you believe? Do I believe? Do I really believe that Jesus wants to be born today, here, now, in your actual situation? Do I believe it? Maybe you could say in your heart, I want to. Or you can say, yes. Wherever you're at, try to say, yes, I do believe. Do you know that you are the stable? That Jesus can do great things in you? This is the message of Christmas, so do not be afraid. Rejoice, for a Savior is born to you. Let him in. Dare to let him change you from an animal stall into his home. Merry Christmas to everybody.